Hi guys, welcome back. This is lesson 2 in our music theory, our basic theory and music understanding videos. If you haven't seen number 1 before this and you're a beginner, please go back and look at the first video, which is parts of the staff. You need to know that. You need to have our roadmap figured out before you can really start understanding notes, rhythms, all of that stuff. So we have our grand staff here. We have our treble clef and our bass clef. We're going to discuss both of them and their respective note names, because the 5 lines and 4 spaces here are not the same as the 5 lines and 4 spaces here. So the first thing that you need to understand is that the musical alphabet goes from A to G. Okay? With each octave, we repeat that, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. There is no H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, and so forth in musical terminology, as far as note names are concerned anyway. So that's like the first big one. I can't tell you how many times I have graded note name quizzes and someone has written J. I'm like, did you guess? Did you not know? Are you trying to be silly? No. A through G. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to start here on note A and work our way up. Remember, in our last lesson, we talked about these 2 staffs being connected by an invisible line here. We talked about how chaotic it would be if the grand staff was just these smushed together with this extra line in here. It would be really hard to read. This breaks it up nicely, having this space here. My staff on my whiteboard is not to scale, so it's not exactly where it needs to be as far as all of that is concerned, but putting this dotted line in here should really kind of help you understand. This is tied together by middle C. So if you can only remember one thing from this whole video, remember that the invisible line here that is under this first line and above the last line on the bass clef is middle C. There are notes right here and right here before we get here, because everything, each line and space has its own note. So that should make things a little bit easier. A lot of you who've already taken some music classes, whether it be choir with me, band, orchestra, choir somewhere else, and even general music classes, should kind of have an idea of how this works. A lot of you have probably learned some silly little phrases to remember the lines and spaces of the staff. So both of these have the lines and spaces, but remember, the middle line here is not the same as the middle line here, okay? I don't know if that would make life easier or more difficult if we had that, but whatever it is, this is what we have. I'm gonna start with the bass clef because why not? Usually we start with the treble clef because more people in our classes here at Skyline are going to be reading the treble clef, just because we have more women in our program, more treble singers. So let's shake it up and give the boys and the some of our girls who sing tenor. Tenors are totally different. Sometimes you'll have to read this, sometimes you'll have to read this. So it never hurts to learn them both. So the first line on here is the note G, okay? Then we're gonna, remember our musical alphabet is A to G. So remember, after G, what would this space be? It would be A. So we're gonna skip the spaces for now because I have some funny phrases to kind of help you remember these note names. So G, and then we have A there hiding. Then we're gonna go to B. And then what comes after B in the alphabet? C. So this space, or this line would be what? D. E in the space. F on the line. G. And then A. My favorite phrase for this one is great burritos don't fall apart. You can tell the difference between a great burrito and a not great burrito by if it falls apart. It's all about the tortilla and the cheese, putting everything together. Anyway, so if you can remember great burritos don't fall apart, then you're in good shape, all right? Some of you may have learned good boys deserve fudge always. You may have learned George Bush drives fast always, or good boys do fine always. If you have heard something else that's interesting or fun, feel free to send me a message or share it through Remind, or even comment at the bottom of this video since these are on YouTube as well. So Great Burritos Don't Fall Apart is my favorite. I'm a really visual learner, so if I can get that idea in my head, I'm not gonna forget it. So after that, we're looking at the spaces on the bass clef. So if we know our bottom line is the note G, the first space is A, because we're recycling the musical alphabet. So we've got A here, and then we know this line is B, so this space is what? C, skip D, go to E, skip F, go to G. So if you go back and forth, bouncing back and forth, you've got G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. And it continues like that. We don't often talk about, when we're learning note names originally, we don't usually talk about this note that sits on top of this line, but that would continue. If this note is on the line and it's A, the one that sits right here on top of the line would be B, and then we're back at middle C and we're onto the treble clef. So back to the spaces here for a moment. A, C, E, G. I've heard a couple here. All cows eat grass. All cars eat gas. Sometimes that's really awful, like road trips. Cars definitely eating gas, not super fun. But these are your notes for the bass clef. Go ahead and take a good look at that. Musical alphabet in line. Just remember, every line and space has its own note. All right, so let's move on to the treble clef here. So we know that middle C is here, and there is a note right here, so that would be D, because we're going C, D. So if we know that this space is D, what can we say this note is? That would be E. So if E is here, the space is F, so the next line is G. And then what do we do once we get to G? We go back to A, so A would be in this space. B, C, D, E, F. All right, some people have heard silly sayings that just kind of mix these ones up a little bit. So this one would be like, every good boy does fine, every good boy deserves fudge, even George Bush drives fast. But my personal favorite for the treble clef is elephants go bouncing down freeways. Take a second, visualize it, love it, use it. That is the one that has stayed in my head always. I think I learned that one back in 10th or 11th grade, but before that I had learned every good boy does fine. That's all right, but you know, what about the not good boys, the ones who pull hair and throw sticks at you? We don't want to talk about them. We're going to talk about the elephants go bouncing down freeways. It's my personal favorite to think of it during snowbird season. So let's go to our spaces. Our bottom line is E, so this space would be F. Line is G. After G, what do we go back to do? A, B, C for the next space. D is this line, so we've got E. Now this one is an easy one. So here we've got F-A-C-E. Look at that face in the space. F-A-C-E in the spaces. And it continues on and upward. So we've got E, F, and then G, and then we can add more ledger lines to go way up in here. If you've ever played flute, piccolo, violin, sometimes when you're up in like 5th position, some of those treble-based instruments, you'll see all of those. On the other side, we can have ledger lines that go way down in here. Typically, our men don't sing anything lower than maybe an E right here, and that's pretty darn low. But you might see notes that are lower if you've played like lower brass instruments, or maybe you've played, you know, like the bass. I'm not sure about the, yeah, probably the cello too, who knows. So it goes on and on and on. extends to all of the notes on the piano. So we've got enough room for all of those octaves. You're not gonna see them going way up in there. What they'll do in that case is they'll put a little 8 up here, so you know that it goes up the octaves. And then tenors will sometimes see an 8 right here if they want the tenors to sing from the treble clef. Just makes things a little bit easier for those in between groups of singers. So here's our note names. You gotta know these. You have to know your note names because it helps you establish relationships between the notes that you have to sing. You can tell that if you go sing from E to this E, it's quite a bit of a distance that you have to jump. So it'll help you identify those intervals or the distance between the notes. One more little clue to help you out if you're struggling with this, hold your hands up like this. Look at that, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. This one's a little short. And 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. So if you wanted to take your left hand and look at that, you could do left hand because this is the lower end of the piano and do bass clef, G, B, D, F, A, C, E, G. On the contrary, you could do the treble clef on your right hand, E, G, B, D, F, A, C, E. I don't suggest going and getting it tattooed on your fingers so you always ace your note name quizzes, but it's another visual tool for those of us who might need a little bit of help seeing that kind of in a kinesthetic, touching, figuring things out situation. So there you have it. There's your note names. Next, we'll be going on in our next lesson to note values and rhythms and things like that with our notes and our rests. So I hope this has been helpful. If you need a refresher, you can access this anytime. It's not going to be taken down. It will be living in YouTube forever.